Good morning, everyone. My name is Jake Davison, and I own the American Family Insurance right here in Wenatchee on the corner of First and Chelan. We're really excited to be able to sponsor Coffee and Commerce this year. At our office, we help people with auto, home, life, business, and farm insurance. You can reach us anytime at 888-9007 or jakedavisonagency.com. We hope you enjoy the program this morning, and we'll see you at the next Coffee and Commerce.
Thanks again, Jake and his team at American Family Insurance. Before we get started, I just ask a few things to keep in mind while we're listening in. Please have your mics muted, and you're welcome to keep your cameras on. We'll have a chance at the end of the presentation to answer any questions, but if anything comes up, please feel free to utilize the chat box, and we'll get through as many questions as we can at the end of the program. Today, we have Jerri Barkley, Destination Marketing Operations Director for Visit Wenatchee, and Dave Blandford, Executive Director for State of Washington Tourism. And these two have been so great in partnering with the Chamber to help our members understand the current state of tourism as we've gone through these last couple of years of recovery. But before we dive in, these two have an incredible background that lead them to where they are now. And I've asked both of them to tell us a little bit about their journey in this industry, what's worked for them, what maybe hasn't worked, the challenges, and what's kept them engaged and passionate about tourism and hospitality. Dave, do you mind starting for us and sharing a little bit?
Not at all. Thanks, Steve. Great to be with you all. And I'm Dave Blandford, and I've been in this industry for many years. In fact, I could say decades. I grew up in Washington State and went to the University of Washington. I left a couple times. I started out my career in Washington, D.C., spent time in Alaska and other places, then came back, and very shortly thereafter knew that I wanted to be in tourism and placemaking and commerce, and didn't have a sense about how to do that, but found a way in, and ended up working in a bunch of capacities. One was with the Seattle Convention and Visitors Bureau for many years. But during that tenure, also then doing some contract work for the state tourism office back when it existed many years ago, to help them with run press trips around the state, help with asset creation, photos, videos, things like that. And then later in my tenure with Visit Seattle, again became involved with state tourism when it became a crisis, when funding was short. In fact, when the office was the least funded in the country and had a series of crises. And then when the office was threatened during the economic recession of 2010, 2011. So I became involved with the Washington Tourism Alliance actually the day after the office was closed in June of 2011. And that was really an odyssey of advocacy for many years, trying to reestablish state tourism throughout the state. The industry very decidedly opted to make sure that we didn't go back to a state agency, but rather that the industry led the new program. And then the details, as they say, the devil was really the issue. And it took 7 years really until we finally found a system that could work, that is private and public, a matching system with private side funds that then unlock public funds. And that was 2018. And so I worked in that advocacy role. I stepped onto the board at some point, then the executive committee, and ultimately became co-chair of the Washington Tourism Alliance. During this time, concurrently was working with Visit Seattle in public relations, marketing, communications, public affairs. What I learned during that time is that we in tourism often go through crises of funding, natural disasters, geopolitical, like 9/11 from 20 years ago, and now pandemics. And so we're all joined, I think. In some ways, the jurisdictional lines don't matter. What really matters is that that we, the industry, continue to partner and work together and respond to these crises. That's really the long-term solution. So 2 years ago, I jumped from Visit Seattle to assume the executive director spot at the Washington Tourism Alliance. And right in the middle of the pandemic, if you've done your math, and sort of an awkward time to do it, but I think it was awkward for many of us for many reasons. And for me, it was actually the perfect time. It was a time to build, to use the crisis, to not waste it, to ensure that the key messages got across to electeds and to business leaders and to the community at large in Washington that tourism growth and recovery can't be assumed. We really have to support it and work together. So that's been a big strategic element in our building. I often refer to us as a startup. I think we're sort of moved past that phase now. We've started up. We've built a lot. We've rebranded, and I think we'll talk about that later. And from here on out, we see a good trajectory for growth.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate that. Look forward to asking some questions here. Jerri, if you could share a little bit about your background, your journey kind of in the tourism industry, and the challenges you've had, and what's kind of kept you engaged and passionate about tourism.
I wish I could answer the last part of that, Steve, but I'm not sure I will. Anyway, hi, Dave. Good to see you again, and Jake and Sasha and everybody. I feel like I'm just talking to a room full of friends, so that's awesome. But awkward. So I grew up in Southern California. I started my career in the hotel industry at age 14 as a housekeeper in a resort hotel, and vowed that I would never live in a tourism area, because what I really didn't like was that when the weather was really good, other people came and then I had to go to work. So fast forward to now, and I couldn't be more excited about what I get to do every day and the experience that I've had along the way. So after that, I went to work in the restaurant and hotel industry, also share decades of experience, and worked in downtown properties, airport properties, convention properties, resort properties. I've opened over 20 hotels and restaurants, have done all kinds of work in that area. Ended up moving to Wenatchee, where there was not a lot of options in the hotel industry, and to use my experience. So I ended up being the director of marketing at Mission Ridge, and was there for 10 years, which was an awesome experience for me. It gave me a great opportunity to learn about the community here, about a specific industry, similar to working in a hotel. You have to learn your demographic, who's coming, who you want, and all those things. So it was a great experience for me. I've been here now as the DMO for Wenatchee, East Wenatchee area for, can you believe it, 9 years. So yeah, pretty crazy. What keeps me passionate is, I remember talking to Shiloh about it in the very beginning, thinking, you know, I couldn't do this job if I didn't know all the things I knew. It's really important for me to understand where the hoteliers are coming from when they're helping with funding and trying to direct and guide the marketing efforts, and offering their input and telling me about their customers and telling me about the changes in the industry. And we must be doing something right, because we've added over 400 hotel rooms in the last 2 years and have another one on the way. So I feel like an expectant mom, like we just have babies coming and babies coming and babies coming, and I don't know how I'm going to feed them all, but anyway, that's my short story.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, Jerri. Thank you both for your introductions. We want to start this morning out really with learning about the current state of the industry, the tourism industry. We've been kind of in a recovery stage, people will say. In fact, a number of businesses are still kind of recovering from the pandemic and that environment. So if you could share with us, I'll start with you, Dave, and then Jerri, if you could share with us. So what is kind of happening in the industry, the tourism industry today? And what are some of the current trends that you're seeing today?
Yeah, we are recovering incrementally, and there is periodic turbulence in many different sectors, I think is safe to say. It's the long-term trajectory here is recovery. We will get back to where we need to be. In the meantime, I think it's safe to say that the pace of recovery is uneven throughout the state geographically. It's also uneven throughout business sectors. So in geographic terms, of course, we're seeing trailheads that are really overcrowded. We're seeing beach communities during 4th of July and other peak periods that are really overrun. We're seeing other parts of the state that really are emphatically looking for more business. They feel like they feel like they're missing a lot of the recovery. So that's a real challenging landscape. From a business sector standpoint, there are certainly hotel occupancies that are really surging and are back to 2019 levels in certain parts of the state. But that's not necessarily even throughout the year. It would be during peak season, but then you still have the lows of the off season or the shoulder seasons. Other areas are really just not seeing that recovery. They're not seeing the occupancies back to where they should be. There are the impacts of meetings and events business, of course, and that's affected a lot of our urban areas. Whereas you have a lot of resort communities where you're seeing really strong occupancy. Factor in airline load factors, and we're all, if you're even remotely looking at air travel this summer, you know that fares are incredibly high. There are still lots of cancellations, service is uneven. That's part of the figurative and literal turbulence, I think, is that the industry is readjusting every day, every week. And we're going to see that for a while. It's going to be uneven. And so then what that means, I think, for the travel consumer would be, number one, there remains a lot of pent-up demand to travel. We know from multiple consumer surveys, sentiment, travel confidence surveys, that people want to travel. They are planning trips now. That pent-up demand has remained throughout the pandemic. It remains now. But this new normal that we often speak of includes lots of dynamic issues regarding service and pricing and cancellations. And so consumers really need to be very sophisticated. They need to watch, they need to plan, they need to have a backup plan. That is really the state that we're in.
Great. Well, thank you, Dave, very much. I appreciate that. And Jerri, can you also just share with us what's happening in the industry today and what are some of the current trends you are seeing?
Yeah. Give me a second. I'm almost there. I'm almost there. I'm trying to be sophisticated with a PowerPoint. So the state of the industry here, I just wanted to remind you where we are. So we're in this beautiful Wenatchee Valley. And how do I go into the next one? See, I'm so sophisticated. All right, I'm going to jump into the numbers. So hotel occupancy in our area is currently in 2021 anyway, when we ended, it was up 22% over 2020. Occupancy in 2019 was 61%. I'm just going to remind you of the little point that I made earlier, which is we're not comparing apples to apples. With an additional 400 rooms in our inventory, if we were to compare apples to apples, we would be at over 75% occupancy. So what that means is that we're doing fairly well, and we're pretty excited about the fact that that we're doing better than we anticipated. Our average daily rate is up almost to the level of 2019, but not quite. So what that means is we have some gorgeous new properties similar to the one you see in the picture there that aren't charging quite as much as they'd like to yet, but they'll get there. And especially with our peak season coming, as David alluded to, we still have a pretty seasonal market. Our hotel per available room is up also 46% over 2020, but not quite to the level of 2019. So we're faring well. I think we're very optimistic that 2022 will kind of level the playing field for us again. in our JLARC estimations, we had over 5 million visitors in 2021, up over 2019. So we did have the volume. I think a lot of them were staying with family and friends, campgrounds, and VRBOs, which are not as easy for us to measure as our hotel occupancy is. And then when you look at paid accommodations and who stayed there, we're up over 1 million. So we were very excited to see those numbers come in as strongly as they did. So our story is don't waste a good crisis. We're getting to the point where we are ready to move forward. I think our story is to learn to adapt, because I think travelers, as David mentioned too, are expecting different things. They have to be in an athletic stance when they're traveling, because they just never know what's coming at them. So this could cancel, or that reservation for that car isn't there. And they have to be ready to relearn and adapt to whatever this travel environment looks like. The same as when you check into a hotel now, you have options. That it's not going to be housekeeping every day. You're going to have to say, do I want my towels changed or not? And it's a very personal travel experience anymore. So I think we are all learning how to adapt to that. And then you add to that the fact that we have less employees trying to provide the kind of service and expectations that people were used to when they traveled before. So now we're all relearning. And 2021 was a great opportunity for us to just, as Dave also mentioned, just regroup, restructure, rebrand, get your website ready, get your photography and your assets ready, and get ready to reemerge as you start to market, and then start to re-engage with your hotels and figure out what it is that you're really offering. What's your product anymore? Is it the same as the product that you had in 2019? And for us, it really is not quite the same. So that's kind of where we're at. I also mentioned that we had, additional rooms, but our Instagram in 2021 was up over 108%. So that shows the interest level. So people are interested in travel and they're interested in coming. And what's lucky for us is it's a drive market. So we have a luxury there as far as getting people here is not quite as hard as having them fly in and get rental cars or take a cruise or doing some of those logistical things that are a lot more difficult to navigate right now. So that's kind of where Wenatchee is at in today.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerri. That's a great update. I appreciate that very much. We're going to kind of seeing shortages in staffing in the hospitality sector right now. But the Wenatchee Valley, has definitely seen an uptake, as Jerri shared with us in those charts. There are kind of an uptake in visitors and travelers here in Wenatchee Valley. But going forward, what are some of the trends that you're seeing for the future of this industry? And we'll start with you, Dave. What's going to be the focus in the next few years?
Yeah, that's the big question. That's what we in the national industry are really all discussing right now. I should probably just to match Jerri's numbers, maybe give you some statewide numbers too, just as a pinnacle here. The statewide visitor volume, and we just received these numbers for 2021, so that's the complete calendar year, 95 million, up 19%, but still only 87% of 2019. Visitor expenditures, 17 billion, up 36%. It's a great percentage gain figure for sure, but still only 81% of 2019. Visitor generated tax receipts, 2.4 billion with a B, up 27%. And tourism employment, 131,000 direct jobs, up 8%. So I think the message here is we're coming back, we're seeing good gains, we're still not really back to 2019 levels.
Yeah.
Trends that we're seeing, I think Jerri mentioned a few of them. Again, there is pent-up demand. People do want to travel, but they certainly must be flexible, and they must watch the news and be ready to have a plan B if needed. Spending, some of the most recent travel sentiment reports I've looked at say, yes, even with gas prices, even with airline prices, we will travel. We just won't spend as much money when we get there. that seems to be that, interestingly, the way that the travel consumers are rationalizing, that tells you that they do want to get out. They want to leave home. They want to fly. They want to drive. They want to do something. They're tired of sitting on their couches. But they also are sensitive to prices. I think that we haven't seen really a huge dip because of rising interest rates, possible recession on the horizon yet. Yeah. But you have to wonder as the weeks go on how consumers will process that and how they will project ahead with their budgeting. I think we'll continue to see travel psychographics around workcations, flexible remote work, school occasions, that is continuing to travel with full family just for that bonding experience, and knowing that work and school has some flex in it. I think that travelers will continue to want the outdoors, and that's going to remain a challenge for us about how we manage the flow and how we educate travelers about responsible travel. We do that in many different ways, of course, which is just educating about stewardship and sustainability, but also seasonality. Do you have to do it in the peak season of summer, or do you have to do it on a weekend? Could it be midweek, especially with flux in work and school and things like that? So there's some, I think, some expectations here for destination marketing organizations to not only get people to travel, but to think responsibly once they get to their destinations.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that very much. I know there is pent up demand. I'm trying to get out there, and it's so pricey to fly. So I understand what you're saying. Jerri, as well, can you just share with us a little bit how you see the future of the industry here in the Valley, Wenatchee Valley, and where's the focus in the next year or so?
Well, for us, we have some goals. We definitely are looking to increase hotel occupancy, explore cooperative advertising opportunities. So we're going to be working very closely with Washington State and their efforts to see what we can tag onto to keep our budget in line, but still hit our goals. Develop a travel budget. So what's been interesting locally is the community has decided that it would be perhaps interesting for Jerri to travel and see what the world is like out there, so that when I come back, I kind of can say, oh, well, this is what's happening and that's what's happening, instead of just reading about it. So we've done a little bit of that so far. Increase community engagement and education around the value of tourism. That's a very important goal for us. Yeah. And our our storytelling videos, which is definitely a trend now. But I was looking through my notes from last year, Dave, and I found it interesting. In 2019, it was all the buzz to talk about over tourism. And we were all ready to learn all about that. And now we have to, it's reemerged, not how do we handle over tourism, but we have pockets of it. You're right. And we have to kind of figure out how to move people about, not necessarily just seasonally, but demographically, so that the state doesn't encounter all of that pressure in one community over another. Leavenworth's doing a really good job of their community trail people that are actually there to greet people, learn more about them, and help them with what's the responsible way to handle their trip on the trail. And here's your poop bag, and take care of our place because it's our place. So I think that the story for us that I've been learning lately has a lot to do with a concierge type experience. So I think because we're small and nimble enough, I think that that's going to be the ticket for us, or at least something to take a look at, which is a concierge type experience. Tell us what you're looking for when you come here, and we'll guide your experience, because everybody's kind of looking for something different, but they do want their trip to be successful. But everyone's level of comfort is different. Everyone's interest is different. And I think we have the opportunity to be able to do that. The people that are coming in the visitor center right now really want a personal experience. They ask very direct questions about specific things that they're looking to do. How do we learn more about your community? Where can we go to hear the stories? What restaurant is more culturally diverse? Or tell me about the Hispanic community and your how does that work here? And they're just really interesting, insightful questions that we have to be ready to answer. And we have challenged ourselves to increase the value of their experience and the importance of their experience. So it's of value to them and they want to come back. Same with investing in some of our sustainable efforts. If we want to be the tree city in East Wenatchee, then can we create a relationship with TRED and have it so that you can donate $25 and plant a tree in East Wenatchee to help them achieve their goal of being a tree city? Or how about a trail vacation and you come out and help us work on our epic trail system here, which is 9 million acres of trail, the largest in the state, and help us learn how to do trail maintenance. What does it take? A lot of people just expect a trail to be there and they don't understand that it takes a little bit of work and a lot of partnerships. So our 2022 goals, in conclusion, have a lot to do with creating a very nice personal experience for the travelers that come here. We've redone our website. We've redone a lot of things to make it that way, and we'll continue to hone in our skills in personalizing those opportunities and providing that information so people can do that.
Thank you, Jerri. Appreciate that. Both of you kind of touched upon rebranding. And as we're looking at rebranding tourism at the state level and then also at the local level, I was hoping you could expand a little bit about rebranding at the state level and the local level. Dave, could you share a little bit more and expand upon the rebranding of the state?
You bet. We have rebranded after 11 years. The last time the state really went through that exercise was 2010, 2011. And so it was time. Our competitors, our competing states had all rebranded in many cases multiple times. We as an industry really needed to come up with something that reflected who we are now authentically and something too that would provide a marketing platform for us to compete for market share out there in the Western states. And so we've completed the exercise. We've built a destination brand. We don't have is not tagline forward per se. This is more of a modern brand, which is a broad platform that is intended to be used across the state, to be adapted in different communities, as well as used globally here for the state overall. The name is State of Washington, and thus our name as a DMO is State of Washington Tourism. That is the state's official name, and we thought that pomp was especially helpful from a marketing sense, but also from a geographic sense, because we know that people get confused between the various Washingtons. We wanted to make it really clear where this destination is. The components of this brand, the messaging, if you will, that really is inherent in it are all about, yes, spectacular nature, but also the confluence of nature with people, with Washingtonians. Indigenous communities, gateway communities to recreation, heritage, culture. We are both here in the state of Washington. And the message, I think, whether you're a local or you're a visitor, would be sort of shared value, sustainability, honoring what exists here authentically. Everything that we've talked about before with regard to consumer sentiment, travel consumer sentiment, the psychographics of travel. This brand, it reaches out to those travelers and says, yes, responsible travel matters. Here's why it matters to Washington. Here are some opportunities for you. Come as you are, be your authentic selves, but understand here too in the destination that this place is true to itself. One of our early mantras, if you will, it's also a tagline, hashtag true to nature, double entendre there, which is to say certainly that we're talking about authentic nature and preserving it, but also saying that travelers and the act of traveling is it's inclusive and we accept all. Somewhere in there, I think, is really a platform for us going forward. And I think everything that Jerri just talked about, it supports that. It says that you're welcome, but you also accept some responsibility when you come. And that then in turn is a nod to who our market is. For us, it is, we've given the market a name, the Pathfinder. So it's not a geographic market necessarily, though we certainly have those. This is more of an identity. The Pathfinder is educated, concerned about lifelong learning, adventurous, but also really caring and wanting to understand the place they'll visit. Eager to follow the trail, but also get off it when it's appropriate to do so. We think that that market, though somewhat limited, is the right one for us. It'll show the most impact. We are not Las Vegas. We're not Orlando. We don't want to be. We want to find the right market that is going to allow us growth potential for the future.
That was excellent. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that very much. Jerri, could you also share a little bit about us, the rebranding that you are in the process and been very successful at here at the local level?
Yeah, thank you. Listening to Dave talk, I just feel like I'm with my family. It's we're definitely part of the Washington State effort and not necessarily doing it in a purposeful way, meaning trying to copy, but we seem to be on the same path. So our rebrand started at the beginning of 2021. We took a deep breath into what is our infrastructure? What are we trying to tell people? So when we come out, we have a very clear understanding of who we are and what we want to say about us. And in redesigning the website, we realized there were a couple things missing from our rebranding efforts in 2013. And that included a mission statement in which to guide our procedures and processes and focus. But also then we kind of took a look at the brand and said, well, the logo doesn't necessarily speak to what we're trying to achieve. So we ended up doing a new logo as well. That isn't always something that's necessary, but it kind of worked in the process for us. So the heart of Washington, because we're in the center of Washington State, we consider ourselves to be at the heart of Washington, at the heart of the state of Washington. So the top two parts of the heart are our mountains and hills that surround us. The W in the middle, it represents our rivers and waters that are inherent to our region, and then the parks, fields, gardens, and lands that we curate and take care of, and even our hills look like that right now. So it's a very beautiful logo, and we thought it added some meaning. So similar to what Dave's saying, it's important to have things that have meaning, not just, oh, that's cute, and it goes on like that. But our rebranding took on a life of its own, including its how we speak, how we treat people when they come here, and our expectations and our travelers, and what we want to communicate as to how we want you to honor our place and how we take care of it and how we want you to take care of it. And that's going to be an ongoing process. We're going to be partnering with a lot of different communities, community partners, to get that word out, similar to what we had to do in the middle of 2020 when the trails were pressured and we noticed so much waste being left on the trail system. So we started this whole partnership and sharing information. I know the state did the same thing. And if you're going to go outside, here's how you behave. So we're going to continue with those kinds of things. So that is kind of the story on our rebrand.
Okay, well, thank you, Jerri. Appreciate that. I'm going to look up at the chat here, see if there's any questions in the chat. I don't see any questions. Does anybody else have any questions? No. Okay. So something I am hearing, Dave and Jerri, and it's interesting as I'm new to tourism and learning from Jerri, thankfully. Dave, you kind of said some words here: shared value, sustainability, true to itself, as a part of the experience that we're trying to share with in the tourism industry. And Jerri kind of talked about that as well, as being a concierge, about honoring the destination where tourists are coming and acknowledging that there is an impact that tourism can have at the destination. Why has this become so important? And really, it seems like a really important focus point. And it's nice to hear these words. So what has caused this?
Yeah, really, it's been kicked around the national industry for a number of years, and the term shared community value has come up as a concept to be discussed and was discussed, I think, in thought leadership circles. Resident surveys, but visitor needs, the confluence of both. The concept of over-tourism, which really began in Venice and Barcelona in Europe, but then kind of spread to the Colorado mountains, but maybe not to everywhere prior to the pandemic. I think that the negative effects of large volumes of people or seasonality weren't felt by everyone until the pandemic. Then it became something that we all could relate to. I think to the general sense, quality of life and growth, especially in Western states and others that are really on a growth trajectory, I think have raised questions then about seasonality. Some have said, yeah, and maybe we have talked about it here. Some have said, during high season, we feel like we lose our community. We can't go to the places we want to go to. Jobs creation, companies moving out of major cities. I know that some companies have moved to Wenatchee recently. You're getting some industry over there, which is wonderful, but it is, it's a change agent for communities. So many factors happening all at once. I think the lightning rod certainly has been the pandemic. That has forced a lot of us to really examine what is happening now and how we mitigate it, but then also how do we look into the future? How long will this continue? Is this the new normal we speak of? Mm-hmm. So these are really good conversations to have. We would have had to get there at some point without a pandemic, but with the pandemic, it's just simply accelerated it.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. And Jerri, you talked about that, kind of about the importance of being a concierge, being kind of a guide for tourism. That seems like it takes a little more effort and work as you're providing that personal experience. Can you share a little bit about how the DMO here in Wenatchee, that experience and how we're working with tourism?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the luxury of being smaller. We have the opportunity to welcome people into our visitor center and have conversation. And the people that work in the visitor center are very well trained in the community, the assets that we have, and how to find the answers to the many questions that we get asked. But our visitor center was carefully designed to be a conversation starter so that people come in and they don't feel like they're in a high-tech environment where there's a screen to talk to or look at or push a button or not engage with people. There's no technology out there. There's a truck, an orchard truck, and there's reclaimed things from the original building that was built in 1928. And then when it was refurbished in 1940, there's, those kinds of things in there to talk about. There's local wines that don't even have a tasting room associated with them and aren't available retail-wise in any other location but here. So we've just been really lucky. The community has created it. The community has come in and said, well, why don't you do this? Well, why don't you do that? And I think we're just very responsive and listen very well. And I hope that continues as we grow in our tourism efforts, because that's our tipping point. We're, as Dave mentioned, Washington State is not Orlando, and Wenatchee is certainly not Seattle. So how do we create an experience that people are comfortable in? They want to come back. They want to create a relationship with. This is the kind of community that you want to maybe buy a second home and come back regularly because you appreciate where it's going, what it's doing, and how it's investing its money in its assets, how we're taking care of the trails, how we're creating usable, easy experience to navigate through our community. But that's kind of my spiel.
Okay, thank you, Jerri.
If I could maybe just compliment Jerri, I really love the concierge concept, and I really like the direction that Jerri, you all are going here. It really makes sense, and it very much marries with the direction that we're going at the state level too. We've said many times with the pandemic that the new marketing has to include travel advisory. has to include listening as well as just marketing too. It is public education. It is that shared value concept, and to appeal to travelers and what travelers want, but I think also assess the situation here in the destination and mitigate it. We absolutely have to think that way. We have to think about the flow. We have to think about educating. We have to promote knowing before you go. Make travel. Don't just show up. Understand the place you will be traveling to and unique sensitivities in those areas before you go. We will make it fun. We will make it appealing, of course. It's, for this market that cares about lifelong learning and cultural sensitivities going forward, we will make that a part of the marketing so that it is seamless and doesn't feel that they're being preached to, that it is more of an opportunity for them to join with us and be a part of what we're all building here.
Dave, you mentioned earlier in your introduction that tourism hasn't yet recovered to that level of 2019. But during this kind of recovery stage in the state of Washington, maybe the resorts have had a little bit more success than perhaps other destinations for tourism here in the state of Washington. And in these resort communities, sometimes that impact is felt, as you said, by the community, by the residents. And you've used the word community shared value, which I thought was great to hear. How does the state of Washington tourism partner with resort communities to just maybe lessen the impact or provide strategic ideas to lessen the impact on the community? Do they provide guidance? And how does the state work with those communities? So there is really a community shared value.
Right. Through our broader destination development program, which is not marketing per se, but rather an industry focused program that includes, yes, the building blocks of tourism, technical assistance, grants, things to get rural and underserved communities up and going, but then also helps resorts and other communities that are a little overloved. And we have several of them throughout the state to really mitigate, manage seasonality, off-season, shoulder season, change up marketing to move in that direction and help make that switch. Our TreadMap app, of course, which the pilot program of which really began in your region with you all, and we're really grateful for that. We've now taken it statewide, and other communities are signing on, and we're building that as a real-time tool that can help recreationists, but also visitors sort of manage and mitigate their own travels and have a better experience, but also be more sensitive to communities. Those programs will just grow and grow. And we often say that we are no longer a destination marketing organization. We're a destination marketing and management organization, a DMMO. Another term that's been kicked around for a number of years and kind of in thought leadership circles, but only now I think is really taking hold. And since we're in building mode, we're really leaning into that heavily. That is our role. So your broader question, it takes time. We don't make that switch overnight. I think for resort communities, it's really about seasonality and marketing, but also working with land managers and others in terms of public information, travel advisories. And that's going to take time to build as well. We're focusing on that with regard to our TreadMap app, and there's part of this program which really lives within the app and on the trails, but another part of the program which is really a concerted effort among land managers, WashDOT, us, others, anyone who would advise travelers how to get around, when to go, when not to go, alternates, dispersing throughout the state. There's a broader program of public information married with marketing that is going to take a few seasons to really see some real growth.
Great, thank you, Dave. Question on Jerri. How can visitors learn about Wenatchee before coming here, what where can they find resources, or where can they access information about Wenatchee, East Wenatchee, before coming here and becoming familiar with the I'd say the many opportunities for just a wonderful experience here?
Well, I would probably lean on the fact that we have a Visit Wenatchee website. So I would hope that being the only message in our many billboards in the Seattle area, that is a resource, a robust resource for them to be able to use. I think that's probably the highest and best use of our marketing dollars, to keep that robust, easy to use, and navigatable, cell phone worthy, all of those normal catchphrases. But I would say that is probably the biggest. The luxury we have in Wenatchee, after going to Washington, D.C. and understanding what Dave's saying about the state of Washington, that's the best way to describe where you come from when you're in Washington, D.C. I come from the state of Washington, and then people know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the lucky thing about Wenatchee is, if you don't know it, you don't know it. Once you learn it, then and spell it or say it, then you can find it, because we don't have to pay a lot for Google to get us to the top of searching for Wenatchee. So, but I think we also partner with regional advertising when it comes to Chelan County and Douglas County, to make sure that Wenatchee continues to rise. And if they're looking if they even understand the word Wenatchee, they'll find us.
So if I was to come to the Visit Wenatchee Visiting Center, how does the visiting center assist me in my kind of learning or trying to discover Wenatchee? What can I expect when I come in the visiting center?
I think when you come in the visitor center, you can expect to be asked a few questions. I think people think of visitor centers as, and I know I said this on a call with somebody from Walla Walla one time, and said, you know, your visitor center is kind of interesting. So I don't know if any of you have ever been to the visitor center in Walla Walla, but it's very much like a hot dog stand inside of a building with a bunch of brochures behind a person. And so you come up, and then they have a dialogue with you, and they reach around and they grab brochures, and it's one person, and that's all it is. You don't get to come in, you don't get to sit down, you don't. Our visitor center is again a conversation place. So we hope that you come in, you see a friendly face, and we ask how we can help you, and then the conversation starts. And it's as simple as that. We just hope that it's, how can we help you? And what are you looking for today? And my job in the back of that is to create the materials that that person needs to answer those questions. Do you need maps? Do you need a visitor guide? Do you need a list of restaurants? Do you need a list of tasting rooms? Do you need a beer trail? Do you need so I constantly listen to what they're being asked, so that I can respond with materials and helpful things that help them. That also helps all of the hotels answer those same questions. So that's my job, to listen. It's their job to listen and ask questions. It's similar to a referral call when somebody says, can you recommend a hotel? Well, not really. I need to, I wouldn't answer it that way, like not really, but I would ask more questions. For instance, well, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a walkable experience? Are you looking for a pool? Are you looking for other amenities? Are you looking to stay on the river? Are you looking for, and you kind of have to ascertain what it is that they would like to experience. Are you trying to save money? What's your goal? And then it's easier to refer. But does that answer your question?
That sure does, Jerri. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So Dave, we're going to wrap it up here. And just anything else like you would like to add to the conversation, or share to the conversation that you might have just kind of come to you while we're all talking here?
Let's keep going. Let's keep partnering and working together. We've got to do that. It's served us well in the past 2 years, and I think the next 2 will be really exciting. Challenges with regard to, I don't want to use the O word, over tourism. I think it sometimes is overused. I think that we have the opportunity to help rebalance the flow and disperse economic impact where it's needed, mitigate communities that are having the hardest problems, like the San Juans and beach communities and many gateway communities to mountain trails and such. We can do that. It is possible. And I think that we can all continue to educate consumers so that they can be a part of those solutions, which is what they want at the core. When you look at travel sentiment, they do want to be a part of those solutions. So that's pretty darn exciting. The fact that we've branded and taken our time to listen to all of you, the industry, and branded in a way that is really authentic, gives us that platform to be shared, to be used, to market as we go. I think we're in the right place. And yep, we're going to have to bob and weave with some world dynamics here. As if a pandemic wasn't bad enough, now economy and war in Europe. You know, we've been here before. People are going to travel. Our markets will continue on. They're just going to change a little bit. So we just have to be nimble and keep partnering and working together.
Great. Jerri, any other thoughts or?
I would just echo what David said. It's really important for us to continue to participate in conversations with other communities across the state and to partner with the state of Washington and what they're doing, because those partnerships are very valuable. You can avoid mistakes or you can trailblaze. And I think all of those aspects of a relationship are very important. So I think the partnerships going forward, learning from each other, and again, how to make the Washington state brand as valuable as we possibly can in that partnership. We all have the rising tide thing floats all boats. We all have to help the state of Washington get to where we want it to get, because that will help all of us. So I think those partnerships going forward are really, really going to be the tipping point for the next couple of years for sure.
Wonderful, Jerri. Thank you very much. Well, Dave, thank you for sharing your role. Thank you for the partnership that the State of Tourism has with the Wenatchee Valley and Visit Wenatchee. So thank you very much for that partnership. I also thank you this morning for sharing about the tourism industry and from this view of the state. Jerri, thank you for all you do. I thank you for sharing about, managing, being a concierge, that personal experience, the importance of the work that Visit Wenatchee and your organization is doing. So thank you very much, and for sharing as well as today. Jake, thank you for sponsoring this. Thank you for making Coffee and Commerce coming back now, webinars. I'm really looking forward to having this that's recorded, Jake, and putting it, making it available for all our members to look at, not only now, but in the future as well. So I appreciate that very much for your sponsorship of this. That's great. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. You have a great morning. Summer is here finally, so excited. Have a good morning.